Well, hello artists. Hope you're ready to do some painting and drawing today. Let's get started. We're going to start by opening up our coloring book file that we created yesterday. So just as a little bit of a review, remember that in Photoshop, the checkerboard here, that means clear. If you see white, you can't automatically assume that it's white. I'm going to start by showing you how to change that if you wanted to, if the checkerboard becomes an issue. However, I strongly recommend leaving it set, your gamut, your transparency and gamut set with the checkerboard, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So you would go to Edit, Preferences, and you would go to Transparency and Gamut. So stop the video and find this panel right now. Okay, so you'll notice that what you have here is it basically tells you what grid size you want. So if I want to change my boxes to small, or I can make them large, I can make them medium or dark. I can even change the color if I want to. It's totally up to you. And if you want to change it, go ahead and click OK. If you don't, click Cancel and leave it set as is. So that's your transparency and gamut. That's where you change that. So if you are trying to delete white and it seems like it's not going away, it might be because your grid is turned off your transparency and gamut. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our layers panel. Very important. We're going to be using our layers panel a lot in this lesson. We will have another lesson on layers, but this one is just scratching the line. So right now you should have a line layer. So it's going to be really important today that you listen carefully when we're switching back and forth between layers, because you don't want to add paint to a layer that you don't in fact want. Before we start adding any extra layers, what we're going to spend some time doing today is we're going to zoom in on our wings here, and we need to erase or get rid of all of this excess that we don't want in here. So just as a reminder, with your eraser tool, we're going to work with the standard eraser tool, not the magic eraser tool, because if I use the magic eraser tool, just a little bit of how this works is if I click on that, it's going to delete anything that's that pixel. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure I don't have that magic eraser tool. I just have the regular one. And remember, your bracket keys left and right on your keyboard is how you change your size. And in fact, if you want to grab your drawing tablet and stylus, it might be really beneficial today in this lesson to get that out and use. Again, I don't require that students use it, but I do highly recommend, especially for this unit. All right, so with our eraser tool, we are on our line layer because right now it's our only layer, and I want you to erase all those little black lines and little black areas. If it's not erasing all the way, it might be because your opacity is not set at 100. So go ahead and take the time, erase those areas, make sure you leave the different wing definitions here. I'm going to speed up. So you're going to take your time, do a really nice job. If you happen to have a weird shaped brush, you may need to change your brush preset up here. You can change it back to a hard or shape. If you're getting kind of a fuzzy edge, you might want to double check and make sure it's set to hard like I just did. But stop the video and go ahead and erase all of these little textural markings inside your wings. Okay, great. Now that you've done that, and you can erase more than I've got here, but I'm just moving on for time's sake, is we're going to make some new layers. So in our layers panel, you'll notice that there is a button down here with a little plus sign. That's going to create new layers. Let's click on it one time, and it should have layer 1. To rename a layer, you simply double click, and we're going to name this the wings layer. We're going to do that again, renaming it again, and this time it's going to be flowers. And then we're going to do it one last time, and we're going to name this one ground. So you should see in here we've got line, wings, flowers, and ground. Stop the video and do that now. Okay, so right now I have nothing on these 3 layers. So I have nothing on my ground layer, I have nothing on the flowers or wings. I only have something on the line layer. As you will see in the layers lesson, separating things out on layers is really important. It makes it a lot easier to control and make corrections if and when necessary. All right, so before we start painting, I want to show you the multitude of ways that you can change or select a color. So you don't have to have any specific tool here. We're just going to play around with. So we all know that you can rechange your foreground color. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. simply by double clicking, and that opens up your color picker. Okay, that's probably the easiest, and for most of us, we're not using a certain preset of colors, so we can just do it that way. You can also open up two panels that we're going to open up here, is your colors and swatches. So color, my swatches is already open, so if I open up the color, it's going to be very much like the color picker. Works very, very similar. The other panel is your swatches panel. So if your swatches panel isn't open, please go ahead and open that one now. Okay, so I want to show you some options. So by default, you probably have these panels in here, are different libraries of color. So you have the RGB, you have CMYK, you probably have a grayscale, pastels, lights, but there are other libraries that you can access online, but we're not going to worry about that. All of the other color libraries are kind of sort of in here. Okay, so if I wanted to find one, I could find some other colors in here. I could also create a color. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to sample a color from another picture and actually add it to our swatches panel. So we're going to go back to File, Open, and I want you to open up one of your previous lessons. I don't care which one. And I'm going to show you how to sample a color. So let's say I know that I'm going to want to use this pink color somewhere in my drawing. I can use the eyedropper tool, which is right here, and I'm going to come across and I'm going to sample that. And you'll notice it changes my foreground color to this color. We're going to switch back to the coloring book, so stop the video and sample a color now. And now just double checking that color is in our foreground. If I want to add that into my swatches so that I can use it at any point in time, I'm going to click on the Create Color Swatch. This is going to pop up, so there's my color. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Pink Flower because I know that's what I want my flowers to be. And I'm going to click OK. You'll notice at the bottom of your panel, I now have that color. And if I let it hover, it says Pink Flower, which is what I named that color. So stop the video and save your color swatch now. All right, excellent. We are ready to start painting. We're going to make it easy on all of us who can't draw, and we are going to use selection borders to make our selections before we start painting. Okay, so we need to click on our line layer. Get this mantra in your head, select on the line layer, switch to paint. Select on the line layer, switch to paint. So you're going to switch to those layers to actually add the color. So we're going to select from the line layer, but before we start painting, we're going to switch to the appropriate layer that we've already made. So we're going to start by selecting our stems here. So we're going to grab our magic wand tool, which is up here in this drawer. Double check you're on the line layer and click inside your stems. And you should get marching ants. That means now if I try to paint or anything, it's going to constrain it to those. So stop the video, select inside your stems. Great. Okay, now before we start painting, we want to switch to the layer where we want that color. Well, I want it on my flowers layer, so I'm just going to click on my flowers layer. And now we're going to fill this in, and we're going to use the paint bucket to fill in today. So we first need to find the paint bucket, which is also in the same drawer as with your gradient tool, so find your paint bucket tool. And go ahead and select a foreground color through any method that you just learned, either sampling or clicking the color picker, however you want to do it. I want you to select a color, double check you're on the flower layer, and then simply click, and it should fill that selected border. Go ahead and stop the video and do that now. Excellent. Go ahead and go to deselect. Now we're going to work on the buds, the flower buds. So let's go ahead and click back on our line layer because we're going to select on the line layer. We're going to go back to our magic wand tool. I'm going to click on the first bud, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key and I'm going to select on the second bud. So now I have both of those buds selected. Go ahead and stop the video and do that now. All right, let's go ahead and go back to our gradient bucket, and I want to load that color that I pre-saved. So I'm going to go back to my swatches panel. I'm going to find that flower pink. I'm going to click on that to add that to my foreground color. Before I click my bucket, I need to double check and switch back to that flower layer and click. So stop the video and do that now. All right, so just to double check to make sure that I did this correctly, I'm going to turn all of my layers off except for my flower layers. And sure enough, those two colors should now be on the flower layer. All right, so we need to make sure our pink buds are still selected. So if you happen to have deselected them, just go ahead and reselect them. We want both of our buds selected because, again, we're making it easier. I'm not trying to stay inside the lines. And this time we're going to add some shading with our brush tool. So I'm going to show you a couple of different options here. We're going to start by grabbing our brush tool. And I want you to double click on your color picker, and I want you to pick a slightly different or a slightly darker version of that color you just filled your buds with. All right, and let's talk about changing the shape and size of our brush. There's a couple different ways we can do it. We already know that you can increase and decrease the size by using the brackets on your keyboard. You can also click on the drop down, you can change it in here, and you'll see that you do have some options. Your standard brushes are in here. We can load other brushes as well, but in order to get to those more advanced things, we're going to open up the expanded brushes panel, which is right here up to the top. We're going to click on that, and it should open up this dialog box. So stop the video and find this panel now. Okay, from here, you're going to see there's lots of different brushes that you have. Okay, you can also click on different brush tips. So you can change those brush sizes if you want. So I want you to go ahead and click on a textured shape brush. It doesn't matter. Before we start painting though, we're going to take the opacity of this brush down. Up in the top in the options bar, we want to take it down to about 53. And we're just going to come and we're just going to paint just a little bit on one of the side of our bottom bud. So stop the video with a textured brush at about 50% opacity. We're just going to swish and make a little shadow. All right. We're going to keep going on. I'm going to show you some other options here. We're going to switch brushes. I want you to go back to a very basic shape brush. This time we're going to click on something called Wet Edges. So what Wet Edges does is it applies a watercolor brush effect, so that if you know anything about watercolor, it kind of will create this illusion of depth where you can see the other strokes underneath. Okay, we're going to change our color again. We're going to make it again slightly darker. Let's take our opacity back up to 100%. So again, darker color, soft edge brush, wet edges, opacity set at 100. Stop the video and get those presets set now. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to brush some shadow work and go ahead and let the brush strokes cross over each other, and you'll notice that you can kind of see the strokes. So if I zoom in here, you can see that wet edges effect. All right, stop the video and try that now. All right, the last thing we're going to do with this bud here is I'm going to show you the smudge tool. And you can experiment as well as following along with the directions, experiment as well. The smudge tool is here in this drawer. It also is in with your sharpen and blur tool, but we want the smudge tool. It works just like a brush. So if you have a strange shape brush, you might want to reload a basic shape brush. And let's take this size down a bit. About this good. Okay, so I'm about 61 pixels. And what the smudge tool does is it literally will act like your finger on wet paint, and it will smudge those streaks. So if I click and drag, it's going to smudge those together. Notice I've got some issues because where I smudge it, it's going to pull it away. But go ahead and try that smudge tool. Excellent. All right, we're going to go ahead and go back to our paintbrush. You can either keep the same color or you can change your color. Open up your brushes panel, double check to make sure you're still on your wet edges, and let's go ahead and fill in some of those gaps. Excellent. All right, from here what I'm going to let you do is I'm going to let you play around with this top bud. You can color it however you want. You can try some new brushes. You can even see if you can load some of the different brush libraries that are in there. There are some options in here, so you can go into the other brush. You can try to get some more brushes online. If you're kind of that ambitious, there are some free ones out there. Don't know if necessarily it will let you pick them or not, but go ahead and play around. There's a bunch of different, there's special effects brushes, all different ones. You can do some crazy things in here. Go ahead and stop the video and finish off that bud now. Great. All right, let's go ahead and deselect this area. So again, I'm just double checking, make sure that that's the only thing that's on my flower layer. Now we're going to start painting the ground. So we're going to click back on the, let me see, I just want to make sure we're doing this right. Yep, we're going to click back on our line layer. And I want to grab my magic wand tool again, and I'm going to select, holding down shift, all of the areas of my ground layer. All right, so stop the video and do that now. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab our fill bucket. I want you to pick a color for your ground. I don't care what color. Before you paint, switch to your ground layer and then click with our gradient bucket. Okay, great. Now let's add some texture to this. So we're going to go back to our brushes tool and we're going to load in here some of those special effects brushes. So you may need to click on the drop down because all of your brushes are going to load. So these are your general brushes. I want you to be in the, scroll down to the special effects brushes. I want you to click the spatter, one of the spatter brushes. I don't care which one you pick, but one of the top 3 spatter brushes. We're going to come back to our brushes preset and we're going to click on scattering. I want you to make sure scattering is clicked in there. And you can play around with your spacing here. You can change your brush size. You can make it bigger or smaller. Okay. If you decide you want a different shape brushes, if you don't like that one. So we're just kind of spacing this out. You can make it bigger or smaller, like I said. We're going to change our color. I want a slightly different color green. And then we're going to click and drag, and it should scatter your brush effect. And if you want to do a couple different ones, go for it. Try a couple of different brushes. And go ahead and fill in your ground layer. Okay, we're going to do that one more time so you have at least one scattered effect back here. We're going to do that one more time. This time I'm going to show you again, we're going to take the opacity of the brush down. So do one more scatter brush effect, change your color. I'm going to use a slightly different color. Take your opacity of your brush down to about 50%. And again, do a little bit of scattering. Stop the video and do that now. Okay, let's go ahead and go to select, deselect. So I want to show you why sometimes you would want to make a selection and why sometimes you wouldn't. So I'm going to turn off every layer except for my ground layer. So it should look like this. So let's do this. Go ahead and turn off the visibility in all your layers except your ground layer. All right, we're going to apply a filter to this. So we're going to go up to filter, filter gallery. And I don't care which filter that you apply. Just remember, if you're in your sketch filters, it's going to use your foreground and background colors. But I want you to apply one of the filters. It can be an artistic filter, it can be a stylized filter, it can be a sketch or distort, I don't care. But go ahead and apply one of those filters to your background layer. Now notice I didn't have an area selected, but it only put the filter on that layer because it's the only thing that's on that layer. I didn't have to make a selection. The reason I had to make a selection before is when I was adding the paint, I wanted to define it using that area. So I selected from the line layer before I painted. Okay? The last thing we're going to do is, still with nothing selected, my green doesn't stand out against my stem. So we're going to make an image adjustment. So make sure your ground layer is selected. You're going to go up to image adjustments and let's go to hue and saturation. And this time I'm going to drag my hue slider one way or the other. I can either go lighter or darker, a little darker, and then click OK. So now I'm showing you, you can do an image adjustment since that layer is separated out. Excellent. All right, we're going to keep moving and grooving here. We're going to actually add something here to our background layer, and we're going to use a new tool to do that. We're going to use the custom shape tool. So we're going to add a flower in the background. So pick a foreground color for a flower that you like. It doesn't matter. We're just going to have flower, pick a color. So if I want a purple flower, I'm going to pick purple or whatever. Pick a color. All right, we need to find this tool in here. So we're going to go into this drawer here. It's under the type tool. There's a drawer of shapes. So you've got the rectangle, ellipse, triangle, polygon, line, and custom shape tool. All of these work the same as the custom shape tool that I'm about to show you. So if you want to play with these at some point in time, you can. But let's go ahead and click on our custom shape tool. Up in the options bar at the top, it's going to show you what the fill color is. That means the solid. The stroke is the outline. So I can do this before or after. So if I want to outline it in a specific color, I can add an outline, but you don't have to. It's up to you if you want to do that. And then let's find a flower shape. So if you click in this over here where it says shape, it just depends on what your presets are set at. It's always going to come up with the last shape that was used. I used one of the flowers, so obviously the flowers is going to pop up there. So I'm going to close these folders so you can see. So what they are is they're kind of like clip art. You don't have a ton of stuff in here. So you've got leaves, animals, boats, flowers, leaf trees, wild animals. There are some other ones you can open up. Sometimes they'll show up. It just kind of depends. So let's open up the flowers panel and click one of the flowers. I don't care. I prefer this one. And then we're just going to come into our image and we're going to click and drag. Don't worry about where it's at right now. Just click and drag. You can make it bigger or small. It's up to you. All right. So now we have this flower. If I grab my move tool, I can move it around. Notice that when I clicked and dragged with the shape tool, it made its own layer. And that's what the shape tool always does. And it doesn't matter if it's a custom shape tool or one of the other ones, it's always going to put it on its own layer because it's a special type of layer. It's a vector shaped layer. Before we go any further, we're going to make some changes. So I can decide that I want to resize this. So we're going to go up to Edit, Free Transform, and you're going to get this dialog box that pops up. So from here, I can make it bigger or smaller. If I want to distort it, I have to hold down my Shift key and drag in one of those so I can make it, I can stretch it by holding down Shift. I can rotate it. I can even completely flip it. So stop the video and apply some kind of a transformation. Again, I don't care if you make it bigger or smaller, just change your size a little bit. All right, again, don't worry about where it's at in your layers. We're gonna fix that. Okay. Just want to make sure that I'm doing everything right because I don't want to have to go back in time. All right. We're gonna do this again. This time we're gonna do it with another flower. We're gonna click and drag a second flower. Notice it put it on its own layer, 2 layers now, okay? But while this is still active, we're gonna open up a new panel called Styles. Just like much of the other tools, we have some folders here. So you've got Basics, Natural, Fur, and Fabric. Let's go ahead and go to Basics. Notice you only have basically a drop shadow and none. Where you get into some of your other patterns is in Natural or in the Fur or Fabric. So in the Natural folder, I want you to click on one of these, and it doesn't matter which one. Go ahead and select one. If you don't find one that you like in there, you can go to the Fabric. Again, there's not a lot in here. These styles are presets that you can kind of download from the internet. I'm going to show you later how to make your own style background, but go ahead and just add one of these to this flower layer. Stop the video and do that now. Okay. Click on your move tool to deselect that. And again, it doesn't matter where your flower is right now, we're going to do some rearranging. With both of these flowers, we're going to rasterize them and change them. Oops. To make sure I'm on the right layer. Okay. So because they're on their own layer, they're really easy to move around. I'm going to put both of these flowers somewhere on the bottom edge, but not, I wanted to overlap my horizon line somewhere. And it doesn't matter how you stack them. So we just got our flowers in here. Don't worry where they're at in the order here. I just want your flowers stacked on top of each other and somewhere across this horizon line. They can be behind these flowers or on top of them, it's fine. All right, with this shape 4 layer, we're gonna rasterize it. So you need to right click on it and go to rasterize layer style. And you're gonna have to do it again. Right click and, oh, actually it worked both ways. You're gonna do that to both of these shape layers. So you're gonna right click and go to rasterize. So stop the video and rasterize both of those layers. Okay, excellent. Now let's go ahead and we're gonna merge these 2 layers. So we're gonna shift click on both to highlight both of them and right click and we're gonna go to merge layers. So now both of those are on the same layer. And we're gonna rename this layer Sky. So now we have a sky layer. All right, now that they're rasterized, I can do some fine tuning. So I'm gonna zoom in. Let's zoom in on one of our flowers. And I'm gonna show you how now that you've rasterized it, you can use your eraser tool to erase parts of your flower if you wanted to. So stop the video and just erase some part of one or more of your flowers. You don't have to go crazy. Just showing that now I can make changes and edits because I've rasterized that custom shape tool. All right, great. Next up, now on our sky layer, we are going to add a background. Okay, so hold on. Let me zoom out so I can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to move my flowers over to the right-hand side. And we're going to move them just above our horizon line. So we've moved our flowers over here to the right-hand side. Oops. If you accidentally move, just make sure you're right on the layer. You just have to be right on wherever it is. So just move them somewhere up in the background. Don't care where. All right. If you want, you can turn everything off except that layer. We're going to grab a new tool. We're going to grab the gradient tool. And we're going to spend a little bit of time here in the gradient tool. So it's in the same drawer as the paint bucket. And you have some options for your gradient tool. So you have a linear gradient tool, which goes from one side to the other or top down. So it's going to go in a line. So I can go top down, bottom up, left to right. I can even kind of go to diagonal. I also have radial, I have angle, and I have reflected. So you can play around with any one of these that you want. I'll kind of show each of them here. We're going to start first with linear. And I'm going to show you how you can load a preset gradient. So you can click on one of the gradients that are in here and just pick a gradient that's already there. Or if you want to make your own, if you double click, it's going to open up the gradient editor. So go ahead and double click and open up that gradient editor. All right, so I'm going to show you how to apply a different color gradient. So you can move your color stops. So you can change the ratio of the colors. I can also change them by double clicking on the color stop and picking a different color. I can also add other colors. So if I click in the gray space beneath this, it's going to add another color stop. And again, I can change that color. I can also delete colors. So if I decide I don't like that one, all I have to do is I can either click on it and delete, or just, I'm lazy, I just drag it right out. And then when you're happy with the gradient that you've made, click OK. So now with this tool, if I click and drag, now watch what's going to happen. Don't do this. Notice it covers up my flowers because it's on the same layer. However, I'm going to show you a mode option. Up here in the top, if I click behind, and now I click and drag my gradient, notice it goes behind the flowers. All right, so stop the video and apply your gradient. Set on behind now. All right, I'm going to show you the other gradients just so that you can see what they're like. You don't have to do this. You can apply a radial gradient. So radial is like in a circle. So it goes around. I can apply a gradient over top of a gradient, unless it's set on behind, which it just was. So if I'm like, why didn't it work? I can apply a gradient over a gradient. I'm gonna go back in time. So that's your radial. The diamond is just what it sounds like. It kind of does it on a clockwise or counterclockwise. This is your reflected, so it's going to work like the gradient, but it's going to work like the linear, but it's going to do top and bottom. And then your diamond does just what it sounds like. It does a diamond pattern. Okay? I'm going to change my colors. I like the iridescent one, so we're going to go with an iridescent one. And I'm going to go radial. And then I'm going to turn all my layers back on. Now if you're like, why can't I see anything? Well, it's because that layer is at the top in what's called the stacking order. We're going to take our sky layer and we're going to now drag it to the bottom. Stop the video and do that now. All right. One last thing I want to show you here, and then I'm going to let you play with the butterfly wings, and you can do them however you want today, is on your line layer. I want to show you, you can still change the color of your line layer. So we're going to select all of that black. The easiest way to do it is to select by color range, because right now the only thing that's on that layer is just the black lines, right? So it would be easiest to go to select color range and click on some part of the black, and now we have our black. So there's a couple of different ways we can change the color of our line layer. We could try in image adjustments, we could invert it so it would make it white, okay? Or I could try to colorize it, using the hue and saturation. So I could hit colorize, I could change it a color. So that's one way I could do it. I could also, with it selected, if I wanted to, I could grab my gradient tool, and I could even put a gradient on it if I wanted to. Oops, I'm set on behind. That's why that didn't work. So I can apply a gradient to it. I'm going to turn my other layers on so I can decide if I like it or not. No, I don't like that one. So let's try. I could use my fill bucket. I want to make it kind of a gray. The problem with when you have a selection like this, if you have other layers on, so you can kind of see what's happening. If you have other layers on, it won't, sometimes it doesn't, you can't get in those areas, so you can kind of see I'm having an issue. Or I could be experimental and I could grab my brush tool. Okay, so if you would like to make some changes to your line layer, you can. And with the time remaining, I'm going to let you color in the butterfly however you want, but just remember, if you're going to select inside, select on your line layer, but click on the wings layer before you paint. Or if you want to do it completely freehand, which I'll just show you before I let you loose today, I can click on my wings layer, and I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool. I'm going to grab my colors. Maybe I want it pink. I'm going to change my brush. I'm going to go back to those basic brushes. Take my brush size down. Now I'm going to show you. Just want to show you a couple things. I'm painting freehand here, which means I'm not worried about staying inside the lines. And that's sometimes a charming thing with digital painting. But if you're like, well, I want my lines to show back on top, you can move your line layer above that. So that'll bring it back. So you can play around with in your stacking order where your line layer stays, or maybe you like that effect. Maybe you like that the line layers are underneath that. Most of the time you're going to want your line layer on top. All right, the rest of the time is yours to practice. You can add extra details if you want. Have some fun with this. Let's experiment as much as you can. That's how you're going to learn these tools the best. Good job.